And a very good evening to you, and welcome to tonight's edition of Politics 101. I want to welcome all you 101ers who are on this evening. And tonight we are going to continue our coverage of the news of the day. And I'm sure that none of you would doubt that the news cycle this past week has been dominated by the race for leader of the People's National Congress, ignited in part by Mr. Joe Harmon's entry into the race. And we are going to have Mr. Joe Harmon here sometime next week, I think. I know we've booked him, so we're going to have him on. And also, we had Mr. Roycedale Ford making that comment, which generated a lot of discussion and a lot of interest. And so as a result of those, we have this news item of the race dominating the news cycle. So we're going to continue, we're going to deal with that tonight. We notice also that Amanza Desir has expressed an interest in serving in the executive, not as the leader. Apparently they're talking about her running for the position of chairman. So that also generated some interest. All of that amongst to the fact that we have to give coverage to that issue, and we are going to do that. So tonight we're going to be talking about that race. We've had the candidates on. They've all given us their positions and various issues. Aubrey Norton has been making the rounds. I think I've seen it on about 2 or 3 or 4 shows this week alone. And if we go by the popular sentiment, he's the front runner. He himself has said that he thinks he is the front runner. So there you have it. And so we're going to be talking about that, not with the candidates and not with formal PNC people. Tonight we are going to break new ground on the show. We're going to have one of our regular analysts on, Dr. Henry Jeffrey. But then we're going to have 2 journalists for the first time. You know, I always want to do an edition of Politics 101 with journalists on, you know, a kind of meet the press kind of stuff. But I've always been hesitant because, you know, journalists in Guyana are kind of shy. We haven't developed the culture where journalists come on to television programs and talk about the news of the week. So I've decided to try a thing and have a kind of 2/3 meet the press with 2 journalists today. But I would like to get your thoughts, you the audience, your thoughts on such a program, you know, a kind of perhaps a Sunday program analyzing the news of the week and that kind of stuff. I think we have to move. We have to move in that direction because Guyana is very much part of the world. And of course, you know, we have now been plunged again into the geopolitical circuit, given our new oil findings and so on, a lot of oil. And so we're now not a global player, but a global space from a geopolitical standpoint. And so therefore, there is a way in which the world is going to be part and has already been part, especially the big countries. They have again ramped up their interest, their participation in Guyana's politics, and so forth. So, you know, there's a way in which we have to kind of begin to broaden the way we do things. So let me get your ideas on that roundtable with members of the media, weekly roundtable with the members of the media to get their perspectives. You know, during the week we are inundated with the perspective of the politicians, and then we have a couple of analysts who are not practicing politicians like Henry Jeffrey is on tonight. But even then, even in that category, you find it difficult to get scholars and civil society people to come on to the program. These kinds of programs, but the press thing, so I'd like to get your ideas in the audience, what you think about that. So here we are tonight. Welcome to you, whether you are in Guyana, whether you're in the wider Caribbean, wider CARICOM region, North America, of course. Quite a lot of you are there. Brooklyn in the house, good night. People from North America who are about 5 hours ahead of Guyana, and they stay up pretty late, and they usually announce themselves that there they are. And of course, my tribal people in Buxton, always in the house. Buxtonians, good night. Good night. So you all cannot abuse me out and say that I don't recognize you all. Good night, Buxtonians. And so just spread the word that the show is on and that we have a big show tonight with Dr. Henry Jeffrey, and we have two journalists, Adam Harris, veteran journalist. Everybody, I think, now should know Adam. Adam goes way back. When I was a little boy in the WPA, Adam used to be the editor of the Chronicle, and then he was editor at New Nation, and we used to have fight in those days, So Adam goes back to the good old days or the bad old days, whatever you think. So Adam is here tonight, and then we have Dennis Chabral from the Marara Waves, probably the busiest journalist on the circuit in Ghana. Dennis, of course, does the Marara Wave, and he has a radio station that is attached. I don't know the numbers, but it's talk radio, and we'll get the number and the dial right. Dennis, of course, is also, we can call him a veteran, a younger veteran. Used to be a radio broadcaster, GBC in those days, and things. So we have an audience, a guest list here tonight, panel that is well placed to discuss the subject of the PNC race, where it is, what is the significance of the race, etc., etc. All of those things that the politicians don't, obviously don't talk about. So we're going to have a frank discussion. Buckle up. And if you have to button up, because you might hear some things that you don't want to hear, because these are journalists, these are independent people, Dr. Jeffrey, Adam, and Dennis. And so they are going to say some things that may not be what you want to hear, but we have socialized our audience, this audience, to be a critical audience. So you all can take blows, even though you are a partisan. Albert from number 51. Good night, my brother. I see Cheryl there from Buxton, always faithful. My two sisters, Denise and Danette Booker. In Buxton, we don't say Booker. Booker. Their mother was one of the foremost vendors in the market in Buxton, and you have strict instructions. You're going to buy from Miss Booker. And the other auntie, Miss Booker's sister, Miss Cadill, she used to sell opposite. And if you say you go to Miss Cadill when they send you to Miss Booker, it's trouble when you meet them. They send you back, Send you to Miss Booker, not Miss Cadill, right? The Bookers, my sisters, welcome. Gentlemen, I have done my thing. Welcome to Politics 101. Dennis, your first time. Adam, your first time. And the PNC race. Let me pose the first question to you guys. I'm going to ask Adam to take the new ball, because I understand you used to be an opening batsman in your time. Why is this race generating such interest? You have to unmute, Adam.
Here we go. Here we
Yes,
go.
there.
Um, to begin with, over the years, and Dr. Jeffrey would know this, the position of leadership was never contested. The first time there was a contest when Mr. Desmond Hoyt was president, and I remember the first challenge came from um,
Hammy.
Mr. Trotman.
Oh, you're
Trotman,
not going
yes.
right back to Hamilton Green.
No, no, no.
All right.
Hami didn't really challenge for leader. He challenged for
Okay.
general secretary in those
Okay.
days when Dr. Reed was the general secretary.
Uh,
And in 1973, they opened up the poster contest.
mhm.
Um, so this, however, while it's not the first time there is a contest for the leadership, it's the first time that contest is going public. There has never been, to my knowledge, a race in the public domain. So when Aubrey Norton first announced that he was going to contest, followed by Mr. Van West Charles, and then Mr. Harmon, there was an interesting thing. Mr. Harmon had a formal launch, a public launch, and Mr. Norton did his on social media, as, as did Mr. Van West Charles. Now, these days, social media is perhaps the biggest thing around. So, when these men launched their campaign and they started to go out there to announce their candidacy, everyone was looking. So, this is new territory. Um, how will it go? I hope that there is not going to be any mudslinging because the party doesn't need it at this time. The talk in all the camps is unity. So we are going to campaign against each other. But in the end, as Mr. Harman said at his launch, whoever wins will get the support of the others because there is need for a unified front. Mr. Aubrey Norton, yes, is the front runner at this stage because he has had more publicity than any of the others. He was followed by Mr. Van West Charles. I saw a couple of his approaches in the media. Uh, Mr. Harmon only had two, his public launch, and then I saw a comment where he was responding to some question about Mr. Norton. But barring that, this is new territory. It's the first time that the leadership of the PNCR is going public.
And there you have it, Mr. Adam Harris opening, making the point there that the launch and social media has given the thing so much publicity that it has generated that interest. Both Richard Van West Charles and Aubrey Norton actually announced on this show. Quite an irony of where our politics has reached. PNC leaders announcing their candidacies on a show hosted by a WPA person. Is that maturity or what? I don't know. Yes, they both announced on this show. Dennis, let me bring you in. The same question to you. Why do you think the race has generated so much interest?
Well, I think for two reasons. But before I go into my reasons, I would want Adam to be reminded that before Mr. Granger actually took up the leadership, so to speak, of the PNC, you would recall that there was what they had called primaries, where they had gone out to the various sections of the country and their support base, as well as the traditional support bases, to garner the views and even to campaign openly. I do recall Mr. Granger going off to as far as the quarantine. I was there, so I know this. And also, Mr. Granger also campaigned, and of course, we know what happened at that Congress with Mr. Granger emerging as the leader of the PNCR and all of that. But I think why I think this is where it is today, it because I think there is a recognition that the PNC needed to do much more than it was expected to do during the post balloting period for the March 2020 elections. And there appears to be a yearning for stronger leadership among the rank and file of that party. Hence, we're seeing various persons pandering to that and trying to get the vote. While we are out there monitoring what's going on in the PNC, while you may have a large percentage of people out in the public domain who are saying, yes, we would like a particular candidate, at the end of the day, it is the delegates who matter, those who are entitled to votes on Congress Day. And we know how parties generally operate in the country. So at the end of the day, it is who actually organizes that internal vote that matters and will come out at the top. There are other issues that one may want to venture into at this stage, but I will leave my comment at this point in time to say why I believe that the PNC is finding itself in yet another round of open campaigning. And I think at the bottom of it, yes, there needs to be unity. In fact, Mr. Harman made it very clear that a lot of things have gone wrong with the PNC in terms of their mobilization and keeping people together. That is an admitted fact by all of the candidates, I believe. But at the crux of the matter is that they all recognize that it needs stronger leadership. Any country needs a strong opposition, whether it be Guyana or the United Kingdom or Montserrat, which has less than 5,000 people.
Dr. Jeffrey, of course, this is not the first race in the PNC or, for that matter, the PPP that has generated public interest. But why the kind of upsurge that we've seen for this particular race? You have to unmute.
Uh,
Yes, there you go. There you go.
yes, well, yeah, good. I believe it's partly the result of the 2020 elections. No question about it. There is a feeling that the party did not respond in the kind of way that the membership expected it to in terms of responses to what was taking place. But I think also it's because if a leader is going to be, if you are going to campaign for leadership, the other leader must make it relatively clear that he's gone. We have a situation where the leader is going on leave. Up to now, you're not certain what is going on. And therefore, that itself raises all kinds of issues. What is going on around here? How many people are running? Is the leader going to... I mean, groups can nominate people and suddenly other people can join the race. Now, the old philosophy of the primaries that took place to put Mr. Granger in place is essentially that the decision was made that we have a new leader. Today, that's not the case. So all of this, together with the 2020 election and the pathway also, what is the pathway that will allow the party to win another election is also an important issue. So all of these things have come together to make this election, leadership election, very, very important. But we must accept too that the bureaucracy, the oligarchy, as I call them, they have the books, they have the registration, they have all this thing, and in every party, they are a critical determinant to who will win. And therefore, to my mind, you have to look around when you are looking to who will come out at the end of this as the leader to what the oligarchy wants. And that is my position on this issue.
Yeah, and both you and Dennis raised the issue of the 2020 election as one of the factors, and I think Adam too mentioned it as one of the factors that has generated this race for the leadership of the PNC. Bearing in mind, of course, that the PNC was part of the coalition that lost the election. I want us to talk about the direct and indirect impact of that race on the developments in the PNC today vis-a-vis the leadership race. And since I have you, Henry, I'll get you to start.
No, I'm not certain I understand the impact of what.
What happened last year around the election. The question of how leadership of the coalition and by extension the party was perceived in that whole period. Did Mr. Granger give in? Was Mr. Granger too soft? Did Mr. Granger's president, did his government do enough for their constituents? All those questions. Do you think those questions have a bearing on the race?
No, I have no doubt that the constituency before the Sharandas motion, the constituencies were quite dissatisfied with what the PNC were doing. They seem to have been in a situation in which they were not in contact with the constituencies and so on. So people will tell you that what are they doing for their constituents? They're asking you that all the time. I think the Sharanda, there might be many reasons. I myself, I'm a very disgruntled person in the sense that I've made it quite clear that I voted for the coalition largely because I believed in the manifesto. They said within 90 days, we will do something about shared governance. They said so within 90 or some days like that. They will do that. Did absolutely nothing about it. And the result is I have warned throughout my writings of that period that, you know, the day will come and you're going to rue this not doing this situation, and the day has come. But that's not the point. So there are other people who did not have that sort of philosophical objective that believed that they were not in the constituencies. They weren't coming around to the people. Now, I see Aubrey say he's going to go back to the grassroots. That's absolutely necessary. Why? Because I believe there were a level of hubris. They won, and they believe they will be there. They were new in the place, and they don't understand that one day in politics is a long time, and things can shift. So that accounts for some of the concern about their leadership, that they did not do sufficient for their constitution. But an important issue too is that, and we don't want to take into consideration, and we largely do not, because we speak to elections as if they are, what I'll say, things that are pure. Essentially, in Guyana, the elections are manipulated by people. It is manipulated by people. And they should have paid greater attention to the manipulations that would take place. And I think they are blamed a lot for this. There's no doubt that the 2020 elections have been tremendously manipulated. And they did not realize it until the last minute, which would show, if anything, show an absence of leadership and sensibleness, given their own history, is that. And so people are concerned about that. The elections were manipulated, and they are running around saying the election was manipulated, but they were there and they know it would be manipulated when they were always in a context of manipulated elections.
Adam, same question to you. Did the coalition's the coalition's tenure in office and the subsequent elections impasse, have those things had an impact on the crisis, well, not the crisis, the situation with the leadership in the party that is really leading perhaps to a new guard taking over?
Yes, it did. As a journalist, and Dennis would bear me out here, when the coalition came to power in 2015, people expected a lot. First of all, it came in on the bandwagon of corruption. So people expected to see this corruption being dealt with. The corrupt ones, they expected to see them prosecuted. And there was a promise that people would be prosecuted. They tried to prosecute some of them. Whether the court was cooperative or not, I'm in no position to say. What I know is that those people they placed before the court just walked. I mean, the president, Irfan Ali, had his case thrown out because he had become the president. And that case had been there for about 2 years. The DPP stepped in and nullified the charges against Anil Nandlal, Winston Brassington, Ashley Singh, and people sat down. None of the party leaders came out to make statements about what was happening. So a lot of people were dissatisfied. What's happening here? Then there was talk that Mr. Granger was not listening to anybody. And again, being the kind of people the party people are from way back when the orientation, you don't come out and challenge the leader. So there was no big public outcry. Yes, there was talk in the street corner, talk at the bottom house, talk in people's houses, but there was no public outcry to what was happening. In the end, when it did happen, then people started to say, all right, we know that, as Mr. Jeffrey said, they manipulated, we will go to the recount. Another thing that had people worried and guessing and angry was the fact that Mr. Granger agreed to the recount without any discussion with the party executive, what have you. There was no such discussion. So suddenly people heard of a recount, and a few party faithfuls decided to go to court, first of all, to question the recount. That matter didn't go anywhere. The recount took place. There were a lot of irregularities and discrepancies uncovered, but these were allowed to pass almost unnoticed. And again, people sat back angry, but not making public statements, not challenging the party publicly, because we all believe you don't wash your dirty linen in public. Well, that has come back to haunt the party. People are now coming out to say, hey, this mustn't happen again. We want somebody who is going to recognize all the shortcomings and deal with them in a manner consistent with what the party has been doing over the years.
You done there, Adam?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Dennis, you come in on the same question.
I think part of the challenge that the PNC has been facing since getting into office in 2015 was the fact that their visibility in the public domain was severely lacking when compared to the People's Progressive Party. Um, you cannot necessarily be in a game at a level of a major party and you do not have the kind of um, I seem to be, oh, and you do not have the kind of mechanism to respond to the People's Progressive Party, because when one looks at the PPPs whole approach to politics. When you look at their Congress material, they focus heavily on elements like propaganda and education. These are critical elements, and I suspect these were also critical elements in the PNC up to the time of Mr. Burnham. So the lack of visibility in terms of responding to the PEP, or actually being more proactive in dealing with public issues lend itself to the PNC and the coalition administration, of course, having a weakened profile in the public domain. And that did not help and continues not to help, even while they're in opposition. It's really difficult to get people to come to you to have key issues discussed, answer crucial questions. Instead, they hide behind weekly press releases, voice notes, WhatsApp chat. You are not, given the opportunity to actually interrogate them on critical issues, and that's what's partly required when you are in the political domain. You need to be as visible as your opponent.
And so you've heard it there from our guests on the impact of the party's stewardship as part of the coalition and government, and how that has led to a questioning of leadership, hence the push by the rank and file, it seems, for a new cadre of leaders. Gentlemen, we've had three persons who have declared thus far. We are not sure whether Valda Lawrence will throw a hat in the race. One or two of our people have indicated that she would not. And as Jeffrey pointed out just now, we are not sure if Granger is going to contest for the position. It is said that Joe Harmon is one of his allies, and so therefore it is not likely that he would run. But the field is still open. We're going to go to the individual candidates, but I want to throw out this question, and that is the point that was raised by Roysdale Ford this week, in which he seemed to be saying that if Norton is elected, the possibility of the party being a quote-unquote black party would be a real possibility, and that could be something that the party would not want, given the need for crossover votes, etc. I interpreted that intervention this way. I saw it as Roysdale Ford raising the question, where in 2021 the new leaders, if they emerge, where would they position the party? This has been an old debate. Should they position the party close to where their base is, racially and so on? Should they deal more with the issues that affect their constituents, which will then put them into the realm of dealing with the issue of race? Or should they tilt the party more to this quote-unquote center, where you ignore some of the issues of your constituents in order to pander to getting cross-ethnic votes from Amerindians and the Indian Guyanese? That's my interpretation. And so I want to throw that out to you guys, whether in fact you think that that was the issue raised by Mr. Roysdale Ford, and I would like to get your perspectives on it, starting with you, Adam.
For one, there has been coalition politics dating back to 2011. The AFC was very multi-ethnic, and the AFC was absorbed into the APNU, which comprised some smaller parties, including the WPA, David.
Yes.
And I have a feeling that the PNC, while it might be the major party, should not be mistaken to be the party that is challenging the PPP. A coalition is challenging the PPP. So if whoever comes out as the leader, Aubrey Norton say, does that make the PNC a black party? I don't know. But if it does, what role is the AFC going to play in the coalition to nullify Aubrey Norton's so-called mobilization of black people? The other thing that I need to take into consideration is the fact that, look, we have not seen a lot of legwork from the AFC. And if there was legwork, a lot of it wasn't highlighted. Now, the PNCR in the old days had party groups, and these groups were visited by members of the executive and others. The party groups died. That was a major mistake. Joe Harmon is talking about resuscitating the idea of having party groups where you're mobilizing members of your party. Aubrey Norton is saying, I am going to confront the PPP with you, my supporters, because a lot has gone wrong and we need to bring them to book. Now, the PNCR, and if I forget the R sometimes, you got to forgive me because I'm old and I'm accustomed to PNC,
Yeah.
was always a party that confronted all its challenges frontally. There was no dodging and backdoor and all kind of thing. It confronted everything frontally. That appeared to be lacking at this time, especially after the 2020 elections. And I think Dennis made the point that a lot of the party leadership appeared to disappear from the membership scene. You weren't seeing them. Those that we saw, Simona Brooms, for example, appeared to be brash. And I think at times there were those in the party who appeared to resent that general approach. Aubrey Norton himself suffered. I mean, we know of him being stripped of the general secretary post by Desmond Hoyt. We know of him suffering other, what was the word I wanted to say? Other demotions within the party and all of that because of his approach. But the PNC itself over the years was always a party that confronted issues publicly and made no bones about it. I think the membership wants a return to those days. And whoever the membership selects as leader would want to see that person run with it, do exactly that rather than sit down and make a few statements here and there, rather than going and meeting the members in their constituency. Go to Buxton, go to BV, go to Pleasance, go to Lillian, go wherever your membership is and meet them there and say what you're going to do and then do it.
Dennis, your take on the Roysdale Ford intervention, and of course my interpretation. Do you agree with that interpretation? And if so, or if not, your own perspective. We missing part of your head, so you'll want to adjust your computer.
Right off the bat, I would say that I think the Royce Ford comment appears to be internal PNC dynamics, trying to pit one against the other. I really don't give it any much value in the wider sphere of things because the reality is both major parties are race based. Mr. Jagdeo has said so much for his People's Progressive Party, saying that he really is in a campaign to attract supporters from the Afro Guyanese community. Likewise, Mr. Ford has raised the issue. Mr. Norton has reacted, saying that he had also been part of a plan to target Indo-Guyanese supporters. It's one or the other. Let's put aside Mr. Ford's comment. I really don't give it much weight in the larger scheme of things. I think he's just trying to find a way to knock Mr. Norton down, and that's their right. That's their politics. But if you're going to talk nationally as a party, you have to take into consideration that some people believe that it's hard for the PNC to get into office on its own. They cannot garner sufficient votes on their own to get into office. They lead a coalition such as the United Force or the Alliance for Change, along with the Working People's Alliance. There are those who say that the very small parties really do not make any sense, but we saw the value of two small parties contesting the last elections under the joiner formula, so there may be some merit in that as far as holding on to a seat in the National Assembly. But if you take the view that both of these two major parties have to struggle and to make a stirring appeal for support from the other race group, then perhaps one of the things that they both have to examine at some point in time is a power sharing model for the country. Perhaps. If not, you continue trying to get to cross that 51% line. And there are those who, as I've said, find it very difficult for the PNC to do that on their own.
And Jeffrey, I know you once made a living studying this whole question of party politics and ethnicity and race. And although you don't make a living doing that, it's still something that you engage in your columns in the newspaper. Is Rosedale Ford raising an important issue that a party like the PNC has addressed?
Dennis.
Yeah.
I must go with Dennis on this one. I think that he is just trying to diminish Norton. But it's a dangerous thing. Both of these parties are ethnic parties. They were at one time, the PNC was this singular party that used to be, well, they were not accused, and all of us believed that they were part of all sort of rigging to keep themselves in power. What we have today, the dynamics has changed. Today, the PPP itself, given the migration issues and all that, cannot easily win a majority. It cannot easily win a majority. And that is where it is. That is why it is now joining what the PNC used to do in the past. Mr. Ford has done what many Guyanese do and is totally incorrect and false. They want to analyze Guyanese politics from a conceptual standpoint of various groups winning support from other groups. Now that was good. That's fine. But when we look at what actually was the outcome, you might not like what it's called Mingo, but he made an important input here. He allows us to see the massive irregularities for ourselves. And therefore, you can't analyze Guyanese politics in any way without introducing this as a major dynamic. Because today, what has happened? The PPP no longer can do this by itself. Maybe the PNC could never, and they join into coalition. Maybe the coalition can't do it on itself. So manipulating the election become an important factor in any analysis of Guyanese politics. But you don't hear that. You hear the theoretical constructs as Mr. Bond was doing.
Mr. Ford.
Mr. Ford was doing, sorry, Mr. Bond, Mr. Ford was doing about, it's not a black man party. It was always a black man party. The PPP was always an Indian party. The question is, you don't have to negate your constituency. Look, look at Belgium. You know that Belgium is considered maybe one of the best countries to live in the world, and it does not have a non-ethnic national party. All of the parties there that run at the national levels are ethnic parties. You don't have to do that. What we have failed to do is to look at our context, our political context, and try to fashion a system that would suit us to govern each other, prosper, love each other, and so on. We are trying to run a British. I saw Vincent was writing a piece the other day in which he says the answer must be some kind of good governance and all kind of reconciliation and so on. I am saying to you, reconciliation would not come before good governance. You have to have a system, even South Africa. You have to have a system that we can all live peacefully in, and then we can talk about the errors of our ways. You don't go around and ask people to talk about the errors of their ways when you're still fighting. And that is the problem in Guyana. Guyana does not have a proper constitutional construct that would make us live peaceful together. And that is it. And I think that Mr. Ford is wrong when he tries to diminish people as racist in the party context, when tomorrow, if he loses, he'll have to support them in the national context. That is precisely what will happen. Because if Aubrey Norton wins the the leadership, well, he can't go on the road and say Norton was a racist. And it was wrong to nowhere in the PPP has anybody ever done that. Both parties have been saying, oh, we're trying to extend our base and all that kind of thing. Nobody that I know has ever done that in the PPP. Accuse anybody in PPP of being almost racist. Because if they win, what are you going to do when you are there? You must got to resign and go. Mr. Norton says if he wins, there will be no problem. That is not a problem, and rightly so. But that would be the problem in the future. So that was an error of, in terms of, and then when Norton was talking on your program the other night about grassroots, he was saying the party grassroots, I can go back to the grassroots. He didn't care whether or not the party grassroots was the Amerindian whatsoever. Indeed, I wouldn't say this, but I'm telling you, I can tell you that. Anyway, even making that point about whether the party thing is Amerindian or not, where you were saying I'm going back to the grassroots, and you have to, and then later Mr. Harman come and talk about the grassroots, that he's too going to go back to. How can you say grassroots mean black? It means black one because 99% of your party is black, not because it just, something Norton conceptualized. So I found that so disturbing, because you are doing a dangerous thing. You can have ethnic party, and we can form a system that we can live together. You don't have to go and have any thing of the country dividing the country and all that. We can live together, and that is the answer to countries like Guyana. You only got to go and read the documents, or else. Maybe, as Dennis said, we're going to continue punching, as we put it, all the time. While people they're using us as ragdolls, do what they like with us. Everybody has done that to us throughout history because we fight in politics.
All right, Dr. Henry Jeffrey there weighing in on the statement made by Mr. Roysdale Ford, and getting a lot of traction in the news and among the rank and file members of the PNC and the opposition. One of my teachers is weighing in here. Mr. Ford's statement seemed to echo the fears of the business community, which the PNC wants to court. The business community is petrified of the idea of the PNC reverting to the militancy of the Hoyt regime. Thomas, you want to comment on my teacher's perspective there? Now you all know how young I am because my teacher is still active, and I think he taught me English. So when I see the word petrified there, so Bishop from Hampshire at Boston, he said,
your teacher has a point.
Yeah.
And all of us here could remember in the wake of the 1995 elections, I think it was, Desmond Hoyt said, there will be no Christmas this year. That was militancy. And the business people complained because black people recognized that their money was doing a lot. And Desmond Hoyt had them in his corner. He tell them, you ain't gonna spend like you had and good this Christmas. That's a statement of fact. And of course, when he walked the streets of Georgetown and the businesses closed, it was bad for their business. Again, statement of fact, because when they walked, people saw a lot of black people walking. They didn't see the few Indians in the party. Militancy was there. In the wake of the 2020 elections, people expected the same militancy, but then we realized that times have changed. Back in 1995, you then got so many guns on the streets, and you then got so many young people who would have wanted to take every opportunity to rob and loot and all of that. But you need the militancy to keep the PPP in check. You need the militancy to let them realize no matter what. And this is so in the United States and all about. Black people are the spenders. And if you can mobilize them, you can have an impact on the society, come hell or high water. Once they keep their money in their pocket and only buying the necessities instead of going with the extravagant brand name boots, shoes, and fancy clothes and all them things, you'd be surprised. It could have an impact. So your teacher had a good point there. Sorry if the dogs are making too much noise. Sorry. But
yes,
I take the view that while it should not be militancy as seen as black people against the rest of the country, it should be party militancy. We are a political party, and this would include everybody. I'll stop them in a minute. And this would include everybody. And there is where the group and what have you comes in. Don't let me fool myself. The PPP got their bottom house discussions where they make no bones about it. They talk to their support base on the basis of race. They ain't got no secret about that. If you have your party group, go ahead and do the same thing. The AFC has its support base. And while, and it's a funny thing, we try to ignore or try not to say things about race because we'd be deemed racist. There is nothing wrong about promoting your ethnicity. Nothing wrong with it. As a matter of fact, the late Haslan Paris wrote 2 books, and I have them, where he showed that we talk about racism, but for the greater part, black men marry black women, Indian men marry black Indian women, and he called that ethnic preference. So if the world sees ethnic preference for what it is, let us embrace it. I have been called a racist, and I don't care two hoots. I don't care. I know what I am. I know how I react to people, and there are people um, all over the divide who know me and would say Adam being a racist. No. But if Adam wants to talk to black people, Adam should be allowed to do that. Because don't let me fool myself. The PPP makes no bones. You look at the fan out exercises they have when they go out. Look at where they go. Look at the medical teams that come from overseas. Look at where they go. They ain't going to no black community. They ain't going in Buxton and all of that. They go to the Indian community. And nobody makes a noise about that. So your teacher is quite correct. The business community knows the source of its revenue, and it's afraid that if people become militant, that source would be severely affected.
Dennis Chabrol, on my teacher's point about the business community may be a factor that influence this whole issue. Dennis?
Well, unless you take the view, are you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you now.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you're hearing you.
Yes, I'm saying unless you take the view that Mr. Roysel Ford was acting as an agent for the business community, then perhaps one can agree with that. But I would like to point out that at the end of the day, given Guyana's racial constructs and socio-economic interests, it is natural that if the People's National Congress reform were to protest for anything, it will automatically take on a race overtone because of how, as I said, the society is constructed. Um, we cannot run away from the fact that the People's Progressive Party is also largely in low base. So, are we going to continue protesting in perpetuity and hoping that one day either party occupies a seat? If people have to agitate, then I think we have to find a multiracial, multi-class platform and find common interests, or else we're just perpetuating the problem. And there goes the fears of your teacher.
Dr. Jeffrey?
Mhm. No, but I think we have spoken to this issue sufficient because, yes, I mean, what I was saying, no, Mr. Ford, I don't think he's any agent. He was just playing games to win, to undermine Harmon. But at the same time, you don't do a thing deliberately. You can do it unconsciously. That is what the result would seem to be. So, but essentially, this thing, unless let me go back, unless we find some way of living together, what has happened in all countries like us, where is going to be proposed for Guyana. Remember, Vincent said they were talking about partitioning. Well, look what happened to India with Jenna and them.
Right.
In the 60s, when it was happened to us, what's happened to Cyprus? Yeah, you can say they live relatively peaceful together. Uh, there. But the same thing was offered to the PNC and PPP by the British. I was always worried that how come the British are talking to the PPP and the PNC at the same time? This is going on and they're not offering the same outcome. And then Quayana wrote a thing and nobody has disputed it. He says the British offered shared governance to the PPP and PNC. Barnum said fine. Jagan said no. And here we are together. No, I'll start the war for years.
Thank you very much, Teacher Earl, for that intervention. Good to see you. Last I saw you a couple of months ago when we were doing a little protesting there. No, we have three declared candidates. Aubrey Norton, Dr. Van West Charles, and former Minister Joe Harmon. Aubrey Norton, if you were to go by the comments on social media, the unscientific polls on the various platforms, and I understand even on the ground in Guyana, is the front runner. Why is Norton the front runner? There must be some factors that are converging to make Norton the most talked about contestant in 2021. Start with you, Jeffrey.
It's obvious we start to it before. Effectively, Norton is seen in practice and in theory. When I was a minister, Norton confront me and say, oh, this is racist and that, and I had to respond. If Norton perceives you to be acting racist, he'll say so, and he'll confront you, and he wrote it in the press, and I wrote things in the press, I'm telling you here, about 1994, 95. I know Norton, we are friends, we drink. But that didn't stop me from responding to him and said, your perception on this matter is wrong. But that don't make him a racist. But he confronts you. And at this stage, I believe too that you need somebody that will take on the PPP and stop them from trying to manipulate the electoral arrangements to keep themselves in government. They will say, of course, that, but they try to manipulate the electoral arrangement to keep them in government. But that is irrelevant. That's gone. I spoke to that when at the time. I am saying now Norton is necessary for the electoral arrangements, because at the end of the day, who governs dictates what they're saying, David, Politics 101, who gets what, when,
and how. Dennis, why is Norton perceived as the front runner? Why all the interest? Why all the energy around this candidacy? What are the factors you think that are responsible for that?
Factor one, he has always been in the public domain as a vocal person. Factor two is opponents. It cannot be said it's the same for his opponents, whether in or out of government. And there are also some other question marks surrounding his opponents, which some people consider. But as I said before, you can use all of these straw polls, these unscientific polls, the Facebook likes, the shares. At the end of the day, it is the internal mechanism in the party that makes the difference. So it is the delegates who have to vote. It is the people who have to arrange a Congress and all that goes with it, right? So we shouldn't bank too much on the likes and the shares. They're valid to the extent only that you can gauge what the wider public says. But what the party internally decides is another matter.
Yes, we quite understand that, but I'm going to stay with you, Dennis. CLR James has this thesis of a time, place, and person. He used it to analyze Sobers, the mighty sparrow, among people. Is person Norton politics?
Are you talking beyond the boundary?
No. That was in another publication that he argued that. He did these two pieces, wonderful. I think it's Facing the Future I think he has a collection there in which he analyzes Sparrow and I and Sobers, and he comes up with that thesis. And Dennis, is there not something to be said about Norton's politics that we've been talking about here? The time, 2021, after everything that you all said happened, and this capacity to absorb the energies, do you not think that that's a very important consideration here?
Yes, it is an important consideration, and I think people are looking at his ability to mobilize and organize, and as the late Kennedy would have said, galvanize. But whether he can take all of these successes into the presidential candidacy in 2025 is left to be seen. We have to look at the need for electoral reform, the need to also analyze what is going on in the society, and probably come to the position where you can engage the People's Progressive Party at the table. I, from the little that I know of Aubrey Norton, I think he has the ideological capacity to analyze the society, and he uses similar tools to those of the PPP in analyzing the society, and therefore he possesses the capacity to ultimately look at what is going on and decide what is the best formula at any given point in time. I'm not for any, this should not be interpreted to say that I'm endorsing anybody. I'm not here to endorse anybody. Let the PNC deal with that. But you asked me specifically about Norton, and that is what I think I know about him because I was once a student. I have been following politics all during my journalistic career, and I think I have a sense that the man has an ideological grounding to understand the society and to do what he sees fit and necessary for his constituency. One only hopes that when we say his constituency, that we are taking it to mean in a wider construct, that it means a bringing together of all races, classes, and strata in the society for the well-being of the entire Guyana.
Adam? Aubrey
Yes,
Norton?
of interest, this book by Bob Woodward, Fair.
Yes, I know it
This is
well.
the book I am reading now. And of interest is the fact that Aubrey Norton is not entirely as Donald Trump was. He was the underdog to Hillary Clinton and what have you. But the amount of work he did went down to the bottom. Make America great again. That was his campaign. And Aubrey is saying, make the PNC great again. That is responsible for his front-running position at the time. However,
But Adam, not cutting you. It's not about making the PNC great again. It's making Guyana great again. That is what matters. You can
I agree with you.
make any party great again, but if they just cannot get it right, other than maintaining their status as a good party, then that's it. It
I
it
agree
has
with
to have a wider objective.
I agree with you. At the moment, this objective is limited. It is limited to the leadership of the PNCR. That's what it is. It's not about Guyana. Aubrey is not campaigning for the wider Guyanese society. Aubrey is campaigning for the PNCR. So his bottom line is, I want my party to be great again. That's what he's saying.
But what does that mean?
But
What it means,
he
go on.
may very well continue doing that all the time to make
What
his
does it
party great
mean?
again and again.
What does it mean if you're going to make his party great? What his party will do to be great again?
Right. Now, the first thing he's doing is mobilizing.
Okay. No, but what his
we,
party has to achieve after he has done all he can do with the
aha.
party to be
Now,
great again.
that is next level. That's the next
Ah,
level.
so Dennis was right. It is whether or not his party can make Guyana great again. Other than that, it can make anything great because it
That's
would
correct
not
again.
suit. Yes.
But between now and the 11th of December, I think Aubrey Norton is concentrating on PNCR, as is Mr. Harmon, as is Mr. Van West Charles. That's what they're doing. They would need, after December 11, to have a strategy that would encompass, and you know, this thing about encompassing all Guyana is a fallacy. You need
That's
to
what has us here.
encompass, huh?
That's what
Sorry?
has us here.
I am telling you,
The
Adam,
audience said,
you want
the
to
audience
be a
said,
leader of a political party to become the leader of the country, whether or
That's
not you
correct.
are right. If therefore, when you go to that political party, you got to tell them what you'll do for the country. You
That's
can't
correct
just tell
again.
them what you're going to do for the political party. And therefore, you know, effectively, to be great, for his party to be great again in the context, it has to run the country for all Guyana.
That is also correct.
Well,
That is why
exactly. So, all
that
right.
is why I am saying that, in my view, Aubrey Norton is concentrating on December the 11th. A very short-term thing. When that is done,
It cannot be done unless concentrating on December the 11th must mean he has a notion of what he will do for the country. It
exactly.
is not one, he can't do one without the other.
I agree again. And that is why I brought up this book. You know, Donald Trump was
Oh,
saying, hey,
please. Donald
yeah,
Trump was crazy as a fox. But
he
the
might have
point
been
is,
afraid.
he came at the right time. Trump came at the right time with all sort of alienation in America.
That's correct again. And isn't Guyana like that? We have all sorts
No,
of.
we have had this going like this for 60 years.
All right. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So what we need to
The
do
question,
first of
Adam,
all,
the question will remain. The question will remain: if one person becomes the leader of the party, what will he or she do to catapult the party into power to achieve certain socio-economic and political goals for the nation? That is
now
what is
remember,
that is what has to
yeah,
be pitched. Other than that,
that's right.
he's only preaching to himself or herself and to a small group. There's a macro objective that has to be achieved.
It's a two-pronged arrangement. I want
Right.
to be party leader to lead the country, to make everybody prosperous and kiss each other on the streets.
Good. And
all right,
Aubrey Norton is
we
not.
will let Adam make his point.
Remember that
Let's go
the
ahead,
leader.
Adam.
No, it's all right. The
Adam, you
leader is
really need a
just.
pencil sharpener for this point.
I'm gonna get
Adam, you
one.
need a pencil sharpener for this point.
You're
The
gonna get one.
audience is saying, asking the moderator to intervene in the interest of fairness. Adam Harris, you have the
Yeah.
floor.
Thank you. Now, the big thing about it is the leader is only one person. Aubrey Norton is one person contesting a leadership position. At the end of the day, the party is a number of people who will come up with the various strategies to push Guyana forward. You know, I hear people saying that Granger was selfish, he didn't listen, and all of that. I don't think Aubrey Norton is running on this campaign to say, I am me, and at the end of the day, I will call the shots. That can't happen, and he wouldn't be allowed to make that happen. So, as I said, it's a short term. He has a pitch. Aubrey is pitching for the party leadership. And I can understand that. The others, at the end of the day, will come together and say, hey, we now have to work for Guyana. And you see all this social media and this exposure we getting now over the leadership, we will need it to promote the party for the greater good of the country.
Richard Van West Charles was the second candidate to announce. What constituency in the party do you all think that Dr. Van West Charles is aiming to influence to catapult him to the leadership? Um, uh, Jeffrey said you don't want to take the new ball, so you have to take the new ball this time. Dennis.
Dennis.
I think Dr. Van West Charles seems to be appealing to the what we like to call the old guard Burnhamites, people who still have some sort of recollection of the Forbes Burnham era, and he appears to be dwelling on the fact that he is the son-in-law of the late founder leader of that party. Um, and he is also a former government minister in the Burnham administration. Very little is known about Dr. Van West Charles among the politicos as well as the ordinary people, relatively young population in Guyana. So he doesn't have much of an appeal. The last say so was that of the managing director or the chief executive officer of the Guyana Water Incorporated. While holding that position, he certainly did a lot, one may say, in the area of expanding potable water access to the country. He is mostly known as a medical doctor in some circles, as well as a senior official, a former senior official of the Pan American Health Organization. Beyond that, I don't know that he brings a lot of grassroots appeal to the rank and file of the People's National Congress. As to whether he will actually garner sufficient votes, I don't know, and I think my arguments may be similar to those of for, as against when one assesses Mr. Joseph Harmon. So what matters is who can create the conditions for a rebirth of their political party. One can say any and everything about the People's Progressive Party. You can criticize them for electoral manipulation, mismanagement, corruption, death squads, drug wars, intergang warfare. But the PPP has been able over the years to present a face that seems to be different, seems to be younger, seems to be multiracial in appeal, and also a little more vibrant. And I think those are the things that the new leader of the PNC will have to confront to ensure that they come up to scratch, to come up on par in confronting their opponent heading into the 2025 general election.
Dr. Jeffrey, your take
Yeah.
on Richard's candidacy?
Well, I think yes. First of all, let me say something. I believe that all of these candidates have strong points. Aubrey, we have spoken to him about him at length. Mobilizer, grassroots man, conceptualize, and all of that. Harmon, maybe one of the best electoral, understanding the electoral system in Guyana, and also a person that tried to bridge ethnic divide. He actually tried to bridge them, and therefore that's why they can try to speak up to of Aubrey in that the way they are doing. Van West has had his international experiences. He has been in the party. He has think he knows something of the international. He knows something of the international situation. As you said, the old guards, but I think that not all the old guards will go with Richard, but effectively, I think that he understands administration and how to guide people and how to move them forward. That is essentially how I want to see the party go forward. Not anybody, any one of these people can become leaders, as far as I'm concerned. But I must admit, the oligarchy, for the most part, will determine who the leader will be. The oligarchy are those in control of the party membership, the agenda, the books, and it in all these parties, in political parties generally, in American political parties. That's why they introduce things like the primaries to reduce the power of oligarchy to determine who will be leaders of this party. And in the end of the day, yes, Aubrey, popular support now because people believe, and rightly so, that the PP needs to be confronted. But also, it must be made quite clear that confronting the PPP alone would not solve the issue. The question is for us today is to try a leader that can, to find somebody that can bring these people together. And the oligarchy going to make that decision for the most part. It has done so in the PPP. It will do so in the PNCR. And that is about it.
Adam, your take
I want
on
to add something. I want to add something quickly, Dr. Hines. And
okay with
I
Adam's
would say
consent.
that
Yeah.
I've seen and heard some of Dr. Van West Charles's writings and his utterances, and I think in large measure he has an analytical mind. He understands the PNC, and so he brings with him those pluses, and one should not negate the possibility of him emerging as one of the senior persons when the votes would have been counted after the Congress, because he has the capacity to analyze and he understands the society from a social perspective, dealing with social ills and so on. But is that sufficient to convince supporters to delegates, sorry, to vote for him, given the oligarchic features and so on that Dr. Jeffrey referred to? I doubt.
Adam?
Yeah. You know, the history of politics in Guyana was always one of a charismatic leader. Burnham, Jagan, these were people, they just stand up and people gravitated to them. After those two, the closest thing I saw coming to being that kind of charismatic person was Barra Jagdeo. Aubrey Norton seems to be heading in that mold largely because he is saying, hey, I can do this. I can confront the PPP. And that's why he's the front runner. The bottom line, though, and I take the point with the brothers, when all is said and done, we need to look at the greater good. The other thing about it, and I hope both Dennis and Henry ain't doing this now, if Mr. Harmon or Mr. Norton or Dr. Van West Childs should lose the leadership, that's the end of their role in the party. Whatever skills they have, they will still be in the party to use those skills. They might not be the leader, but a shrewd leader, as Mr. Granger did when he beat Carl Greenidge. He kept him there and he used him. He used the skill Greenidge had. So whoever wins will have to use the skills of those who are also contesting the elections. So it's not the end of the road. It's not that you're going to throw it away. Yes, each of these men have strong points. Those strong points would still be within the party after December the 11th.
Mr.
Let me,
Harmons, go ahead,
let me say
Henry.
one thing.
Yeah.
Party business is more than using skills. Adam, let me say this to you. Party, yes, you can use a man's skill, but he sits down there and you're not, you say you are listening to him, but you go and do what you want to do and all of that. Party business, party makes government policy. They put it in a manifesto. And when the government wins or loses, If it wins, the party expects the government to carry out the mandate of the party. Now, to make government policy, you have to sit down there for hours and be prepared to discuss with other people and be willing to accept that you're wrong and bring the groups together. Now, it is not just some I'm saying using skills. I think one of the biggest problems is Mr. Granger was this incapacity. This incapacity. He doesn't want him to face the national press. He believes he can sit down and make these decisions all by himself. He can sit at a meeting, don't say nothing, and then make a decision afterwards and that kind of thing. Party discourse. Jagan would sit, Burnham, anyway, Burnham and these chaps would sit down with you for hours. They got a position. They will not impose the position. I have good experience of that. They will not impose the position. They got a position, but they wouldn't make you sit down there for hours arguing that position with everybody around. And at the end of the day, you either have a consensus or somebody. In one case, with me, Dr. turn up and says, "Come on, leader, the boy has a point. But it seems that you don't want him to leave that name in that document. If that is what you want, let us take it out." He will take it out. And I took it out. It wasn't my name. It wasn't going on. But I took it out. But this happened hours of discourse. And Quarrel and Borna was just sitting down there and making the point, but he wasn't carrying people with him because it was not. I know why he was doing it, but it's for another day. What I'm saying to you is that is the nature of this thing. And unless you have the capacity to do that, Megan meeting and Borna meeting used to last a long, long time. The question, if you got the capacity, I don't think Mr. Granger was ever a politician brought up. Aubrey Norton is more brought up in that sort of situation of quarreling all the time to come to some kind of end product of what you want. And that is, Granger was never, he was an army man, he might have been a PNC, but it was all surreptitious. And therefore, he operated in more like an army style. But so when you are talking, this is not just about using another man's skill, keeping in a cabinet and bypassing him, and then do what you want. This is about the capacity to sit there, argue with the press, argue with anybody, sit down and put your point and win it over, organize to win it over. They organize, all political leaders do that. They organize to get the things through because they know that they got to sit down there and think it. So once we understand that, that is perhaps one of the points of both one of the parts in favor of Norton, but certainly of Van West Charles also, because he has been there. That's why I said all these poor people have their skill. Valerie Lawrence too, if she throws her hat in the ring. Because in this game, you need somebody to sit back and say, "Hey man, you don't think you're going too far?" And Valerie Lawrence could well be that kind of a person. Y'all don't think that we should back up a little bit and look forward? She might not win the day, but she put the thing on the table. So it's a different kind of thing. And
Adam,
yes, sir.
Your take on what Joe Harmon brings to the race?
I know Joe. I have seen what he has done. The party, he has gone out there without funds. And I mean, you go to Agricola, you go to West Demerara, you see, and Esquibo Coast, and you see party offices, posh party offices. The party suddenly is recognized for what it has. Joe has that capacity. Joe has the capacity to solicit financial support. Joe also has a knowledge of the various assets, and I'm talking about the physical assets that the party has, the properties and what have you. He knows that. And he's going to have to be able to target that to make those assets viable. A lot of us would remember you had the KSI's Knowledge Sharing Institute buildings. We got a party office on Albert Street. We got one in New Amsterdam. We had one in Durban Street that's allowed to go. Those assets need to be developed. You need to take them into consideration. So your members would sit and see, hey, yes, this is my party thing going. Joe Harmon can bring that to the table.
How do you?
Dennis,
Uh,
Dennis, your
yeah, but I was
assessment
about
of
to
Joe
ask.
Harmon's candidacy?
I was about to ask. I was more about to ask Adam. How does he, you know, rationalize that with those who may perceive Mr. Harmon as being too cozy with sections of the private sector that may have been previously considered as being inimical to the interests of the People's National Congress?
Well, Dennis, you can answer that question.
I don't
Exactly.
know. I'm asking. I don't know an answer. I don't know what
Anyhow,
is being.
your assessment of Mr. Harmon's candidacy.
You see, the thing about it, Adam, is that I don't have much to work with really beyond knowing Mr. Harmon as the Minister of State and as the APNU chairman. These the limited public profile of Mr. Harmon beyond the press conferences, even sometimes we had challenges with those, where you left the press conference and lo and behold, later in the afternoon, um, the Ministry of the Presidency announces a major decision. I mean, how do you rationalize things like this? You know, media relations have a lot to do with it. What is your public profile? And I don't think I have a lot to judge the man on to say, yes, he is or he's not. Um, to be honest, that's it.
Henry?
I think that I know Joe Harmon a long, long time, since at university, and I wouldn't say in the context. But I believe that the PNC should be thankful to Joe Harmon for being around for both the 2011 and 2015 win. That is what gave him the profile in that party. Joe Harmon, as I said before, knows elections in this country more than anybody else. Well, maybe they have people around, but at least as all other people, he was running from co-op society elections for long. He understands it. And but for both the 2011 win and 2015 win, they have a lot to thank Joe Harmon for. They didn't use it wisely. Maybe he didn't use it wisely, and they're here today, but they have a lot to thank him for. And therefore, as I made that point before, and I'm going to say it here, I believe everybody in that place have their strengths, and everybody their question, because Mr. Granger was not a real politician, he was not brought up in the argumentative scheme, he couldn't use it properly, and therefore the result is he goes away, make decision, he think he can make decision. Harmon may be a little bit like that himself, but goes away and makes decisions and can put all parliamentarians and leave out senior people and that sort of thing, saying, oh, I wake up one man with some crazy idea that, yo, you got to have a judge to be the election commissioner next day. I can do it unilateral. These kinds of things, political leader got to sit down with his people and discuss and come to conclusion about. And therefore, as my conclusion is, I don't, the oligarchy anyway going to determine who win this, but all of those people that have put their name up, they have their place.
But Dr. Henry, Dr. Jeffrey, I'm not so sure if I got you exactly clear. What is it that Mr. Harmon knows about elections that makes him an asset? What is it?
He knows, he was even assistant commissioner, I think, now, CEO at the election commission. He knows who can manipulate elections, how to organize it, to stop them, and all of that. That's what I'm saying to you. He's Corbin, Firoz Mohammed, who died. I know those kinds of people who knew that. And I do not believe that you have anybody around outside in the PNC knows more than him outside, maybe of Corbin, but he's gone. But what I'm saying to you, that is it. And you need to know that in a context where elections are manipulated in this place all the time.
But how did you figure it out before the election?
Huh?
Dr. Henry Jeffrey
Did not figure it out before the election.
What? Of course. What?
I'm asking, how did he not figure it out with all of his expertise?
We can deal with that at another time.
You remember what the word I meant?
You're here to answer questions, not to ask questions.
Hubris is the result of that. Hubris.
Dr. Jeffrey has made a revelation about Joarman that I don't think the rest of the country knows. Joarman was the election agent for a party that I know very well. A lot of people know that. And he was appointed to that position because of precisely what Jeff talked about. Knowledge of it's not a skill that the country knows much about Joarman, but I'm very glad that, that you raised that here tonight. On that note, gentlemen, I think we have exhausted our time. I want to thank you all very much for coming on. I know sometimes the journalists tend to ask the questions and don't want to answer the questions. I think the perspectives that you brought to the discussion really helped me and helped the audience. Any closing thoughts? Any burning thing anybody wants to say?
Best wishes to all.
Adam?
The same here. The same here. You know, I've been with this party from, oh my God, as far back as anyone wants to go. I was not a member in 1964, but you grew up in a household supporting the party. So from 1964, and then I joined the YSM in 1967. I understand the party. I know what is needed. I know what the people would like to see at this time, especially when they feel that they're being victimized, when they feel that they're being persecuted, and they must take it without having a leader to represent them. I know what is being said. So, again, as Dr. Jeffrey said, and Dennis, all the people contesting the leadership have their qualities. Who best would represent the kind of leader that the party needs and wants? That's another story, and the answer we will know on December the 11th.
Thank you. Shabral, last closing thoughts?
I'll be here to cover it inside out. I look forward to that. All of the intrigue.
And what is also not known tonight here on the program, we have 2 BV man and we have 1.5 Buxtonian.
All right.
So it's an East Coast connection. Dr. Jeffrey and Adam Harris.
Dennis is half Buxtonian.
Half Buxtonian. He lived there for a couple of years. I see he was showing he owns that he grew up on.
All right. Well, the two BV men, we know where they're there.
You know the 2 BV men. Still go back and pick up the little books. Thank you very much. It's been quite a program, of course, and I'll bring you guys back as often as I can as we go through this journey to December 13th. And of course, there are other issues other than the PNC race that I would want you guys to weigh in on. So thank you very much. And to the audience, I say thank you also. You came out in your numbers again tonight, and I'm sure that there was a lot to agree with, a lot to disagree with, a lot to chew on, and that's what we want on this program. Lawrence Houston, I say good night to my brother. I can tell him good night to you. Some of the heavy hitters I'm seeing in the audience, and all the ladies who are the heart of our audience. I want to say thanks to you. Lawrence, you're going to hear from me because I need to get you on some of these programs to give your insight. So you're going to hear from me shortly. I see my friend David there, Roslyn, Norton all the way. Thank you all so much. Have what maybe a nice weekend, and I'll see you guys here again on Monday. Good night.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.